We're here,
Yeah, here we are.
and it's an honor and privilege to delve into the Griffith soul.
Is that what we're going to do? Uh-oh. I'm ready.
All righty.
It's a dirty job.
Should we
go right ahead? Fire those questions.
All righty. What's your favorite color? No, forget that. Let's go with the flow, with the slides. Let's see what they bring up, because we have a lot to talk about, a lot of territory to cover.
Okay. You want to hit the next slide? Okay, yeah. Well,
one of my favorite images of science fiction history.
Yeah. I grew up in Levittown, Long Island, the original post-war suburb. And oddly, next door to me was somebody I like to think of as the only beatnik in Levittown. He had a goatee, and he illustrated science fiction magazine covers mostly, named Ed M. Schwiller. He later became a fairly well-known experimental filmmaker. But as a kid, he was my next-door neighbor. He was a major inspiration for me. And every once in a while, he would knock on the door and say, "Would one of you family members please come over and pose for me?" So there's me in 1957, at the age of 13, I guess, 12, 13, hijacking a rocket ship to the moon. That guy on the screen admonishing me is my father. And that is a dead-on portrait of my father. It's exactly the way he looked. And I always think this encapsulates my relationship with him, because he's basically telling me, get down to earth, get your head out of the clouds, which is what he always said to me. And this is like our relationship summed up in one illustration right there.
Now, there's another great cover, isn't there, Bill, where you're in a bubble helmet and there's a little alien buggy type thing on looking at you?
Yeah, it looks somewhat like me. This is the one that looks most like me. My mother was also on covers, and mostly on Mike Shane mysteries. He did Mike Shane mysteries. So she would be usually being stalked by somebody, and the stalker was also my father. So, we were like unpaid models and happy to do it. It was totally...
Somehow it doesn't have the same cachet as those Norman Rockwell models who they always round them up for reunions, like they posed for the Postman or the Boy Scout.
Right. Science fiction cover models should have their own union, I think.
There's a great website called Galactic Central, which has literally about 10,000 scans of old magazine covers, and you'll find this one there and the other one that features Bill, and you'll have to track them down with a little Googling, but they're all there at Galactic Central. It's a lot of great viewing, and he probably has those Mike Shane covers with your mom too.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I would think so.
You could hit the next one if you want. And, it segues into Levittown a little. Do you have anything you want to say?
that suburban environment and milieu and growing up ambience that I think was central to a lot of folks of our generation, because it was kind of a novel thing at the time, and we were still exploring the parameters of it. But it's shaped your adult life immensely, and your work, hasn't it? It's still with you to this day.
Yeah, I always like to say Levittown was a great place to escape from. As a little kid, I loved it. As I got into my teenage years, it started to feel kind of deadly. There's an old saying Gertrude Stein said, there's no there. She was speaking of Oakland, California. Oakland, California is full of there. Levittown had no main street, no character, no place to hang out. It was the atomized suburbs. Every house was an individual little fortress, and not a lot of places to interact. I would get on my bike and ride 5 miles to the nearest real town and wander up and down the main street and go to the Woolworths. And eventually I discovered the Long Island Railroad, and I spent my later teenage years hanging out in Greenwich Village. So like I say, Levittown inspired me to get out of Levittown and to explore the outside world, all of which was very romantic to me. And I think that I have a number of friends that I grew up with who have the same feeling. They would go into New York and just feel like this was the real world. On the other hand, my mother and father couldn't have had a house, couldn't have afforded a house without Levittown. It was no money down, World War II GIs returning home.
It was actually one of those great inadvertent sociological experiments.
Absolutely,
mean, it was
yes. Yeah, of course, there was a lot of there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes in Levittown. A lot of my mother my mother was sort of a amateur / professional writer. She got into publication a few times, but she had a writers group, and they would meet every week. And they were literally the 6 intellectuals of Levittown would get together and have their little meetings. So
they could have formed like a Justice League.
They basically were. They were. Yeah. So I would listen in from my bedroom, and who knows. M. Schwiller and my mother's writer friends probably were a large part of why I became a cartoonist.
Yeah. Now, Bill, something that's kind of far into to the current child raising attitudes is probably the total freedom of mobility you had. Like, how old were you when you were allowed to get on the train and just go into the city by yourself?
15.
Yeah.
Maybe even 14.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but I pressured heavily to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there was. Yeah, I mean, Levittown was kid-centric. So as a little kid, it was just, you just wandered around from house to house and played fort and war and all the things that boys do. And then as I got older, I just wanted to get out.
Yeah. Well, you've mentioned the centrality of comics and Mad Magazine and stuff. What was your source for that? Was there a little drugstore or the Woolworths?
Right down the street was a little shopping center with a luncheonette, which is a word that I think is associated only with Long Island and New York. There's a counter where you could get a soda and candy and comic books. They actually sold paperbacks. I bought On the Road, Jack Kerouac, in that store. Yeah. I bought Faulkner and Hemingway in that store because they were just on the rack.
Yeah.
And there was Mad Magazine, of course, and Uncle Scrooge, which is my favorite, Little Lulu, which I read and kind of worried that it might be for girls, and so I shouldn't tell other people I was reading. I would buy it when other boys weren't around. To this day, Little Lulu really holds up.
It was always Tubby to identify with.
Yeah, but the name was Lulu. It was basically a girl on the cover. So, I'll hit the next slide, I guess. What is the next slide? Yeah, so here we are, skipping ahead a few years.
To when you had been radicalized, the greening of Bill Griffith.
I went to art school at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn for 2 years, after which I dropped out and took my student loan and went and lived in Paris for a year. When I came back, I was still in the mindset that I was going to be an artist in the Jackson Pollock, Vincent van Gogh tradition of some sort. And I tried that for a while, but in 1968, I saw the first Zap comic, actually in a magazine store in Times Square, next to the Porn. And also at that same time, I saw underground newspapers like the East Village Other and Screw, which was a sex paper, but also was part of the underground. And I started to see Kim Deitch's work in there. Kim Deitch was a classmate of mine at Pratt. He actually showed me Little Nemo and Crazy Cat, which I had never heard of. But then I dropped out of the whole idea of comics and went trying to be an artist. Then I saw Kim's work in the East Village Other, and I thought, interesting, something's happening here. And then a friend of mine had an idea for a strip. He said, why don't you do it? I did it. I took it to Screw. They published it. Hit the next slide. It's an absolutely true story. How I got my start in the comics biz. It was late 1968. I was a painter, a fine artist. A friend suggested I try my hand at comics. There's me saying, see, this is easy. I'll whip out a couple of pages and take them to Screw magazine. They'll love it. Portfolio in hand, I visited the offices of Screw, then in its first year of publication. I'm looking for the art director, Steve Heller, who, by the way, later became the art director of New York Times Book Review and is now a dean at the School of Visual Arts. Heller, he's in there. You're lucky. He's in a good mood. Yes, Stephen Heller, the now renowned New York Times senior art director, writer, and book designer, published my very first comic strip. And there's Heller looking at my stuff. So I'll tell you what sold me, Griffith. You're the first guy to walk in here with a piece drawn to the correct proportions. It's absolutely true. It's the only reason he printed me. And I remember looking at that, and I went to the office just to get some free copies. And I said, how many copies of this do you print every week? And he said, 10,000. I said, what? 6 people might see my paintings. 10,000 people see this? That was the end of my painting career. So,
Bill, where are those paintings now? Do you have them?
I have photographs of them.
Photographs of them only?
They don't exist physically.
No.
I do have photographs. My paintings were becoming cartoony.
Uh-huh.
They were sprouting word balloons. So I was heading in that direction. But Crumb and Kim Deitch pushed me.
Do you ever indulge in
painting?
Yeah, on canvas, acrylics or oils or anything?
Nope. Completely. I left it behind 100%. No desire whatsoever. Could do the next. What is this one? Oh, yeah. This is somebody just had one of these upstairs and asked me to sign it. I couldn't believe.
The first printing of that issue?
Yeah, there's only one printing.
One printing? Wow.
The first printing is the only printing. Yeah, and my very first strips were all focused around this character, Mr. the Toad, who was kind of an egomaniacal, mean-spirited guy. And I still do him today. He's changed quite a bit. He's more philosophical. And Zippy was introduced as a sidekick. You can see Tales of Toad #2. You see a little inset of Zippy on the top left. I had no intention or no awareness that Zippy would ever become my main character. I thought he would just be a foil for Mr. Toad. I thought he would be his opposite. Mr. Toad was egocentric. Zippy has no ego. Mr. Toad was angry, and Zippy is accepting. And I thought they would be a nice, Mutt and Jeff, Abbott and Costello comedy team. And instead, of course, Zippy became the main character, and Mr. Toad sort of faded away. But that's what happens.
Now, this you arranged for the printing of this comic too. This is not, you were kind of jack of all trades. You drew it and
No, these were published by publishers.
Okay.
Yeah, in 1970, I left New York for San Francisco because that's where the underground comic books were happening. They were all being published out of San Francisco. In New York, the only outlets for underground comics were these 2 or 3 underground papers, which were rapidly pushing us out. We just weren't making enough money for them. But in San Francisco, after the counterculture explosion of the late 60s and Robert Crumb's first comic books, there was this huge scene. Mm-hmm. And myself, Kim Deitch, Justin Green, Jay Kinney, dozens of us all migrated out to San Francisco. So my early stuff was published by the Print Mint in Berkeley. The Print Mint got its start with doing posters for all kinds of left-wing causes and stuff. Mm-hmm.
So there was a whole infrastructure to support the artists.
Absolutely. I mean, everybody was in the same boat together. Nobody was making a lot of money. The publishers and the artists were all kind of out of the same background, same age. But it was a business. It actually was doing okay.
And you felt, on a personal level, as an East Coast guy, you felt at home in California? Not right away?
No, instantly.
Instantly you did?
Yeah. It's like,
yeah, it was very, and you were there for decades.
I stayed there for 28 years. Yes, I'm back here now, but that was where I did all my early work, and I'm incredibly grateful for the whole. It felt like an art movement. There was a comic book store on 23rd Street in the Mission District, and we would all hang out there. We would, comic books happened. They were generated in this comic book store. Somebody would come up with an idea for a comic. Maybe Art Spiegelman and I came up with an idea for a comic book called Short Order. All the stories had to be short. That was the only idea. And it came out. 6 months later, it came out. That happened all the time. Mm-hmm.
And did you have a sense, a little bit of, it's hard to tell, not to conflate hindsight with what was happening then, but did you have a sense of that movement, that it was a historical kind of mini renaissance or burgeoning?
I felt it very strongly,
Yeah.
yes. I felt, I kind of wondered if I was being a little, swell-headed or pretentious,
Yeah.
but
it seemed like something new and exciting.
The guy that ran the comic book store was named Gary Arlington, and he actually looked like Gertrude Stein. He had long hair, and he had a similar physique to her. And I would mention that to him once in a while. He didn't know what I was talking about. He was really nuts. He thought all the underground cartoonists were incarnations of EC cartoonists. He specifically assigned us different people.
He could map.
We were the reincarnations of. I was Gil Kane, I believe. And then at a later point in his career, he decided that he was Jesus. Mm-hmm. So he was pretty flipped out. But we would meet there. We would hang out there. I met everybody there. I met Crumb there.
Those were very potent bonds of friendship that have lasted down the years.
Yeah, and I didn't have to have a day job. I sold enough comics to just do comics for many years there. You can do it on the next slide with this. This is what kept me in rent money. That those two Tales of Toad things were not major bestsellers, but the one on the right, I put these together just to see what we were parodying. The one on the left is actually a Jack Kirby cover. I don't know if you guys are aware. Jack Kirby did dozens and dozens of romance comics. Some of his best stuff, I think. But starting in the late 60s into 1970, I was doing parodies of these girls' romance comics with Jay Kinney and Art Spiegelman. And I put it together in a comic and brought it to all the publishers. Printment, Ripoff Press, Last Gasp, those were the three big ones. They all turned it down because they thought it didn't have socially redeeming qualities if it was busted. They thought it was just...
Which was the Supreme Court measure at the time for how to define pornography.
What they really were saying was it wasn't counterculture. They're saying this doesn't have the hippie counterculture vibe that we like. But then there was a new publisher starting up that had only done one or two comics. We brought it to him, and he was just grateful anybody brought him anything. He published it, and it instantly sold hundreds of thousands of copies. And so this is really what paid my rent the first couple of years in San Francisco. Without that, I would have kept doing comics, but it wouldn't have been that easy. I would have to have another job.
Bill, as someone who has a natural bent for satire and parody and comedy of all stripes, do you ever get that Woody Allen feeling, where he says comedians aren't sitting at the adult table? Do you ever feel that you mentioned them turning this down because it wasn't serious or countercultural enough? Do you ever get that notion that Woody Allen has expressed that comedians are kind of get looked down upon in the art world?
Yeah, I think for most people, they experience comedy as a kind of guilty pleasure. And so to take it seriously seems to go against the grain. It doesn't seem to quite compute. But that feeling of maybe being excluded a little bit, I got over that a long time ago. I mean, I'm perfectly happy to be the outsider pressing his nose against the glass, looking in and making fun of everybody inside the window.
Excellent.
Yeah. The next slide. So Zippy came along as a result of a cartoonist named Roger Brand, long dead, in 1970. He was putting a comic book together, underground comic called Real Pulp Comics. So he was aware of my Young Lust work, and his only editorial guidelines were, why don't you do a love triangle story where two of the people are normal, quotes, and one person is very weird. He didn't specify pinhead or how weird, but it just said very weird. So I was thinking that over. Then I visited another underground cartoonist friend of mine, James Osborne, also dead. Both these guys died of overdoses. And he had a collection of circus freak postcards. that were sold by the circus freaks in a town in Florida when they weren't actively touring with the sideshow. So this was like kind of a little way of making a little extra money. And he bought them all mail order. And there I came across Schlitzie. And that rang a bell because in 1963, when I was at art school in Brooklyn, I saw the movie Freaks, 1932, Todd Browning. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it or heard of it. Incredible movie. It's a movie in which circus sideshow freaks actually are the actors in the story. They're not actors. They're the real deal. There's a human torso, no arms and legs. There's several pinheads, bearded lady, the gamut of sideshow characters that you would associate with the circus. And so I said, here's my weird guy for my love triangle. And if you hit, I think the next slide might have then I thought, okay, what shall I give him? What's his name? And I saw another sideshow postcard of this guy, what is it? So I thought, okay, Zippy. I mean, I didn't think this was going to be the rest of my life. I just casually called him Zippy.
Did you have that classic Disney song Zippity Doo Dah in mind? Maybe at the back?
Not at all. No. People would say that to me later, but no. Didn't connect. I just thought I did think of Zippy the chimp. But then 5 years into doing Zippy, I'm reading a history of circus lore, and it has a bio of him. I'd never seen a bio of this man, Zippy, what is it? And it said his name and his birth years, William Henry Jackson, 1842, 1926. My name, my given name, is William Henry Jackson Griffith.
That's pretty...
Pretty darn cosmic. I mean, I literally dropped the book. And I had to look at it again. Did I fantasize? Did I hallucinate? I'm not stoned. Wait a minute, what's going on here? So, you connect the dots. I was meant to do Zippy, apparently. And my great-grandfather, who I'm named after, was born in 1842 as well. He died in 1941. He lived longer than Zippy, what is it? But he had the same birth year, so...
I want to mention that a lot of this history, in fact, the majority of it is in Bill's massive, wonderful collection here, which you'll find at the Fantagraphics table, which you can see how I've marked it up.
Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, I came out with that last year after many years of procrastinating. I finally put it together because my early stuff is lost on all kinds of yellowing newsprint all over the place. So that way you can check it out. So I'll go to the next. And so that's the first appearance. You can see the original Zippy looked a lot like Schlitzie, and he was a lot crazier. Schlitzie was dressed as a female, by the way, because it was a guy named Simon Metz, that's his real, he was incontinent, and it was easier to change his diaper if he had a muumuu. So that's where Zippy's costume comes from. A guy who was incontinent and had to have his diaper changed.
And this all came out in the Hollywood pitch, right? This is why there's no Zippy movie to this day.
Don't get me started. Yeah, we can get to that later, or we can talk about it now. Yeah, there's been attempts to make a Zippy movie from, I guess, it started in 1982, and it finally fizzled in 2000. But not without me amassing wonderful anecdotes to tell at cocktail parties.
And the diaper was the real crucial break.
Nobody ever brought up the diaper. They would bring up the muumuu. We would have meetings with studio executives, and they'd say, Bill, we love the script, and Zippy's very funny, but it is a guy in a dress. I once got this from Dennis O'Brien, who was the business manager of Handmade Films, which was George Harrison, the Beatles film company. He came to San Francisco. He met with me. He said, George loves Zippy. Oh, that's nice. We love the script. That was always a warning sign. We love the script, but... And he said that thing about the man in the dress. And I said, well, it's kind of his trademark outfit. That's how he dresses. He doesn't have any other clothes. He just wears that. I said, it's kind of colorful, isn't it? And he said, no, we have a problem with the man in the dress thing. How do you feel about a tank top and jeans? I had to pause to see if that was a joke, And then it wasn't a joke. And I said, what? Of course, that night I went home and did Zippy in a tank top and jeans. And I had him, dressed up. I did a whole strip about it later. But
well, it's kind of the classic.
I got wonderful ideas from these surrealistic Hollywood meetings.
It's the classic Brando look from Streetcar, Named Desire. And Zippy would yell Stella at the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know what he was thinking. Anyway, go to the next slide. And then I realized Zippy was what I was meant to do, and I started doing solo Zippy comics, and they started doing pretty well. In this one, he's actually in a sideshow environment. And there's little Lulu looking shocked, a little bit terrified. And there is another inspiration for Zippy. Behind his word balloon are Pip and Flip, who were exhibited in Coney Island as the twins from Peru. Peru, Australia, these were places where pinheads were. They were exotic locales, yes. Pinheads were also occasionally exhibited as wild Australian children.
Do you ever, it just now occurs to me that Zippy is kind of in a much longer lineage even than the sideshow. He's in that kind of medieval lineage where they would fantasize about the kingdom of Prester John, where the men had the faces in the torsos. And so he actually flows from kind of a much more mythic background.
And also from Commedia dell'arte.
Yeah.
Where a character like Zippy did exist in Commedia dell'arte troupes. He was a kind of a jester fool character. He had slightly tapered cranium kind of mask and a big long nose, and of course an erection for the entire time. That was a big part of that character. But I became aware of that very early in doing Zippy, and I'm sure it had influence on me. These are like the two main moods of Zippy: exuberance and intense contemplation. I wouldn't call it meditation. I would call it more like some kind of interior hallucination going on in that one. But also, I have an amusement park in the background there too. And then his enigmatic donuts, which kind of, I don't know what they symbolize. The yin and yang of the universe.
Well, there's three of them, like the famous Bushmiller rocks.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, we'll get to Bushmiller later too. Okay, you can hit the next slide. Well, I did a strip in whatever this year is, 2010, as a little thumbnail history of Zippy, because physically he's actually changed quite a bit over the years. And so you can see the first Zippy as he was depicted in that first strip we just looked at. And so these Zippies, and each one of these actually are taken from underground comic strips from the 70s, early 70s. And there's Griffey saying, there you are back in 71, fun, huh? And today's Zippy saying, but I look kind of insane. And the old Zippy's going, bee, 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 bee. The old Zippy was much more off the wall, loose cannon, talk about non sequiturs, that's all he did.
You know what I'm just flashing on? A very similar evolution is with Daffy Duck. When Daffy started, he was just like totally manic and off the wall.
I love the early Daffy.
Yeah. And
there was no content, no storyline.
Right, but he graduated to more verbal sophistication.
Yeah, he did. Well, you can only keep that up for a while. Right. It's a kind of energy that doesn't sustain, even though it's exciting at the time. So then Zippy is in the middle. It says, "There's you in '75," and the now Zippy says, "Please, no more. I'm having an identical crisis." And the old Zippy saying, "Everyone out of the genetic pool." And here you are in 1978 during the Carter administration. No, I can't look. Please, no more. Give me a ticket to Mars. Soon. And there's Garfield, the anti-Zippy, saying, come on, moo-moo boy, let's do an obvious punchline. And Zippy saying, what's a punchline? And Griffith is saying, uh-oh, I may have scared Zippy straight. This came out of, I don't know if anybody was aware of, I forget what year it was, 6 years ago, Garfield's 25th anniversary. The phrase he used was, "Are we having fun yet?" which rankled me to no end. Yes. Are we having fun yet? Obviously, to anybody who knows Zippy, originated with Zippy. It's actually in Bartlett's familiar quotations. I did not like seeing Garfield doing that, and so I got back at him. Also, Garfield really is the anti. He's the anti everything. I mean, to me, he's everything that's wrong with comics. I mean, don't get me started. Anyway, you can go to the next slide. What do we got next? This is my cast of characters. Zippy does have a family. I like to call them an occasional family, because Zippy forgets that he has a wife and 2 children very often. They also forget that they are related, and they make casual appearances with each other. I don't use them as a family very often, but they're there when I need them.
And we should mention that the cast of Zippy is humongous. These are just the core members.
Yeah.
You have created an astonishing number of characters over the years, and especially nowadays with the newer strips that bring in a lot of figures.
In 2007, I started, I don't know, it just evolved. I thought, what if there was a city where everyone was a pinhead, and they all dressed like Zippy? And so I just imagined it, and I said it was 17 miles west of Baltimore. A lot of people have written me saying, is this it? Is that it? And I called it Dingberg in kind of a tribute to Duckburg, Karl Barks. And I thought it would just go on for a few days or a week or so, but it took root, and I'm still doing Dingberg. And as Paul said, a lot of characters have come out of that, not many of which only make one appearance, but many of whom make many appearances. And just last week, for some reason, these things come to me. I don't question them. I thought, what would it be like if a ghost inhabited Dingberg? So I've been drawing a guy called Murray the Ghost for the past week. And he just interacts with Dingberg people. And who knows why or how long it'll last? I have no idea.
I think my favorite is the Charles Bukowski analog.
Oh, yeah. That's coming up later, maybe? But, yeah, I love Bukowski. And so I created a character called Slouch Gavitsky, who is the bard of Dingberg. And he's basically Charles Bukowski. I just kind of altered, parodied Bukowski's poetry. That really struck a nerve. I got a huge amount of mail over that. People really like that.
He's a great new character.
I remember I was reading, it came out of reading. I was reading a book of Bukowski, of poetry. I like all of his stuff. I was reading a book of his poetry at the same time as reading The Fabric of the Cosmos by Brian Greene. And I realized there was some interconnection here. I'm reading one chapter of one and one line of another, and then suddenly Slouch Gavitsky appeared. And I still use him occasionally. So what's next? Oh, this just an example how I love this Mr. Toad. I've never gotten tired of him. He scares me. I've had dreams where he's waiting outside my front door with a baseball bat. I think he embodies my father to a degree, my authoritarian father. My father was a career Army guy. But over the years, he's changed. And I still get scared when I do him, but I like the feeling that I have, like that I'm controlling this scary guy. I'm working on another book now, but after I finish that, I think I'm going to actually do a whole Mr. Toad book, a new Mr. Toad book, because he connects me to my origins as a cartoonist. He's my first character.
The one obvious question would be the Wind in the Willows connection.
Yes, where he springs from the Wind in the Willows.
Yeah, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride.
Kenneth Graham.
Was that a book that you liked as a kid, or did you come upon it later?
I read it as a kid, and 1966, before I was doing comics, I was already drawing my version of Mr. Toad from Wind in the Willows, and that's where this character came from.
you ever seen the live-action version of Wind in the Willows?
No, there's a live-action version.
It's one of the Python guys. It's either Eric Idle or Terry Jones. It's pretty bad, but you might have to track it down.
I've been on Mr. Toad's Wild Ride in Disneyland.
Oh.
I thought they'd let me in free, but they didn't. Yeah, but look, I'm promoting your... No. Okay, next. It's just emblematic of Zippy and Griffy's relationship. Zippy, there's something about duality, that I like. Like when I started out doing Mr. Toad, I realized you needed someone to bounce off of, to be the opposite, so I created Zippy. Then after Mr. Toad kind of faded away and I had Zippy by himself, that was okay for a while. But then I thought, okay, now Zippy needs somebody to be his sidekick, so I put in myself. Mm-hmm. And, whereas Zippy is open and accepting and somewhat childlike, Griffy is insecure and opinionated and ego-driven, and they seem to be nice opposites. Mm-hmm. So this is,
You mentioned that your Griffy avatar had a solo existence for a while. Before he interlocked with
right. He in 1973?
Yeah, I think
1973. I put myself in a strip. I think I was probably inspired a little bit by Justin Green, cartoonist, who did a comic called Binky Brown, which was his childhood self. And by Crumb, it seemed to be, and Art Spiegelman, everybody was doing autobiographical stuff, or at least inserting themselves into their own comics. So I started drawing myself. And by 1975 or 6, Griffy was a regularly appearing character by himself and just spouting opinions. Very early, I noticed that in LA, there was a place called the Griffith Observatory, which is still there. It's featured in, what's the James Dean movie?
The Jimmy Stewart?
No.
Rebel Without a Cause?
Rebel Without a Cause.
Yeah.
I don't know. Rebel Without a Cause, the movie?
Yeah.
There's a big scene there.
Is that the climax?
Yeah, the climax scene. Sal Mineo dies.
Right.
And, so I thought, gee, Griffith Observatory, a telescope looking at the stars. But if the telescope was pointed down at the city, that's Griffy. That's kind of Griffy embodies, who Griffy is. So I started doing these strips called Griffith Observatory. And then around 1978, suddenly Zippy wandered in, and Griffy and Zippy started interacting, and they still do to this day. And I think of it as like the two parts of my brain finally getting together, finally interacting in a direct way. People ask me, am I Zippy? I say, on a good day, yes, I'm Zippy. Am I Griffy? On a bad day, I'm Griffy. So, I get to unite the two parts of me in a comic. It's probably one of the healthiest things that I can do for myself. So I go to the next. I think this is just a typical. I'll read this one. I like this one because it illustrates the relationship between Zippy and Griffy nicely. So Griffy is looking up at Zippy, who's apparently in charge of a locomotive, and Griffy is saying, "Zippy, what are you doing up there? You don't know how to drive a steam locomotive." And Zippy says, "It's okay. This isn't real life. It's a dream I'm having." And Zippy says, "In reality, I'm sound asleep in my bed with the TV on, tuned to home shopping." And Griffy looks up and says, "Then am I in your dream too, or am I yelling at you from downstairs to turn off the TV?" And Griffy continues, "Am I a figment of your imagination or an unwanted intrusion from the real world?" And Zippy says, "Sorry, if I took time to ponder such deep philosophical ramifications, I'd be late on my milk run to Kansas City." You can also see at the bottom right, it says tip to, and then someone's name. I think it's two people's names.
Bill and Laurie
Holtzer. Holtz, or something like that.
No.
No.
Holtz.
Yeah, some hard to pronounce name.
Yeah.
Whenever I use photographic references that people have sent into me, I give them credit. Now, I don't accept ideas for strips, but I use real-world locations all the time, diners, sideshow, not sideshow, roadside icons like the Muffler Man, giant ducks. And a lot of them come from readers. They send me photographs all the time. And whenever I use them, like I say, I give them a tip.
Let me, as long as we have this slide up here, let me just, because, you know, we've talked about history and the strip as a whole, but we haven't talked about the meticulousness, the beautiful, just the sheer beauty of the strip. I mean, there's so much to admire here, you know, and in a daily strip, too, the amount of effort and creativity that goes into something of this complexity astounds me. And I want to mention something that I don't think you get enough credit for is your lettering style, because, I mean, lettering, there's a whole cadre of professionals who do nothing but lettering, and yet you do your own very distinctive lettering, which to me is highly readable, and it's well, somehow it fits the strip. I mean, it looks like the lettering that should be there. So
well, I think of lettering as a form of drawing. Early on in my career, I remember having a publisher say, "We need to correct a spelling mistake." So I would say, "Oh, okay, no problem," and they'd say, "Oh, we'll take care of it." And I wait a minute. Only I can actually correct the spelling mistake because it's part of the artwork. I've had to make this argument several times in my life over the years.
Well, especially with the ease of computer-generated.
Yeah, of course, now they can clone, and it looks okay. But before that, I would have to make a big point out of, no, if it needs to be corrected, I have to do it because my hand drew the images and the stippling and the cross-hatching, and it also drew the lettering. And which is why I don't like it. You know, it's personal prejudice. I don't like it when cartoonists use computer fonts and when they drop in fonts that they've created, even if they've created them out of their own lettering style. To me, it misses some tactility that connects to the drawing. And as far as all the detail goes, it's just, I don't know. The more I keep doing my strip, the more I draw. I just like to draw.
Well, that raises a question about your sketching habits. Are you one of those artists who fill daily sketchbooks like Jim Woodring? Or
I don't do it every day, but I do it when I when I go traveling around. I also keep a notebook in my pocket in which I just make very rough sketches or take notes on ideas for strips or write down snatches of conversation or like all the people in Dingberg have odd names, so if I hear an odd name, I'll write that down.
So once again, you know, this level of artistry is not effortless. It's still, even at your stage of mastery, it still requires, you know, that you keep at it and
yeah, but it's
become easier, of course.
It's actually it's pleasurable.
Yeah.
I don't know when this happened. Somewhere around 2000, 1999, somewhere in there, I noticed I crossed a little line, and there was no longer any. There was no longer any obstacle between me and my strip for that day.
That's a great feeling.
Yeah. I think it's just from doing it every day for so many years. I don't know. I don't do it consciously, but if I look back at all my strips, Zippy started as a daily in 1985, and if I look back at the whole run of it, I can see that I kind of rebooted or reinvented the strip every 7 years or so. And I think I'm due for another one any day. You can move on. This is just sometimes I still do just solo Zippy. This is Griffy. So this is when, using his formidable powers of nostalgia and yearning, Griffy transports himself back to New York City in 1946. So he's looking at a guy in the corner. Treasure this moment, pal, because it'll all turn to cheap plastic in a few decades. And the guy looks at him and says, geez, another one. Griffy walks up to the guy. But you don't understand. I'm from the future. And all right, enough. I'm calling the time police. The time police come over. Okay, let's keep it moving. Where are you from? My eye scan says 2012. I'll need you to come with me. Griffy says, wait, what? No, I don't want to return. I want to stay here in 1946. And the time police yells at him, come back, you lunatic. You could alter the whole course of human history. Griffy says, I don't care. I'm on a mission to prevent the birth of Donald Trump and spare the world his obnoxious persona. If only. If only. You can go to the next one. I'm not going to subject you to this, but if you go to the zippythepinhead.com website, I actually have a tutorial on the website for people who can't fathom what I'm doing. And it's tongue-in-cheek, yes. It's meant to be funny, yes, but it's also, I think it's instructional. And I've had many people tell me that it actually helped them. Of course, they have to be ready. They have to be halfway there already. But as long as they're halfway there, this can get them to the rest.
This is your own version of Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics.
Exactly. Exactly.
It only works on one comic.
Right. So I'm not going to bother reading this, but if you do want to look at them, there's 6 lessons. Anyway, go to the next slide. Another example of my little reinventing of things. I don't know, when this started in maybe 2004 or 5, I just thought, okay, I have Zippy having kids, but what if Zippy was a kid? And then I get to play with the whole, the kid's book form, the kind of Dick and Jane language, but turn them all into pinheads. Like at the bottom, little Lippy is Zippy's twin brother. In adulthood, he's described as Lippy's twin yet diametrically opposite brother because he's always miserable.
He wears a business suit.
He wears a black suit,
yeah.
And he has no top knot. But as kids, they're just kids. So little Zippy and little Lippy scampered across the weed-strewn, pot-holed parking lot. They scurried past the toxic waste facility and the dead strip mall. They dashed down the cracked sidewalk, waving to the homeless lady and the crazy man. When they finally got to the old fishing hole, it was contaminated with mercury, so they had to make a decision. Should we go home and play violent video games or hack into the Nuclear Regulatory Commission website? It's hard to resist turning kids into, the darkest possible character you can imagine.
Do you think you had in the back of your mind the mainstream comic strategy where, if Superman's
the origins,
good,
yes.
If Superman's good, then we need Superboy and Superbaby and
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. So I'm just sort of playing with that idea. So go to the next slide. And just, sometimes I just don't want to do Zippy. So I usually wait till Sunday. This is my daily strip on Sunday. There's me. So true, all these, whenever I do these things called random memories, they're all absolutely true. My mother worked for a cartoonist as a secretary, and he put out a book called Best Cartoons of the Year. And one year, he gave her all these are gag cartoons. He gave her the pile of original gag cartoons that were sent in by the cartoonist to be chosen. And he said he was too busy and would she take care of it. So she came home, and she had them all on the floor. I came home from school, and there were hundreds of gag cartoons, including Virgil Parch, one of my favorite cartoonists, all strewn all over the floor. I couldn't believe it. And she literally said to me, I'm busy making dinner. Why don't you pick them? So I picked the Best Cartoons of the Year in 1957. It came out. I went to the nearby bookstore, and I was beaming with secret pride. I couldn't say to anyone in the bookstore, of course, which if I did, they would have dragged me off to the nut house. I picked all of those cartoons. Those are my favorites. And I say, sorry, book. Irwin Kaplan. He was a well-known cartoonist at the time that he didn't make the grade, so I left him out. And then this is another thing I do. I do my family occasionally. I'm doing a graphic memoir right now, so I'm very involved in family history. And this is about my father. A very mysterious figure. Never talked about his childhood. And so I just kind of lay out some of his bio here. In 1940, at the age of, 25 years old, I found out he ran for Manhattan's 3rd District on the Republican ticket for the city council, the state assemblyman. A poor kid from Hell's Kitchen. All I could think, he must have walked by and they must have said, hey, we have to put somebody up. This is 1940. New York was 100% Democratic. Roosevelt was coming into his 3rd term. And my father ran as a Republican. as a token figure. He probably got 6 votes. I never talked about it. I found out it's online. I found it out online. You put his name in, and it pops up. So I do these strips about him. You go to the next day. Unless you want to talk about
How are we doing on time, Bill? Are we watching?
getting closer to the end. Yeah.
Okay, good. I don't know if you want to advance anything.
Yeah, why don't you go past, this is Dingberg, and we've talked about that. We can go past this. And I'll just...
And the new collections of Zippy have Dingberg as a theme, kind of. They revolve, a lot of the strips revolve.
There are now 3 Dingberg books. Welcome to Dingberg, Ding Dong Daddy from Dingberg, and as of today, the Dingberg Diaries.
The newest.
So you can move on to that next few. I guess just see what happens. Yeah, so it's Dingberg.
A typical day.
Yeah, typical day in Dingberg. The women are all they all make saxophones out of recycled pantyhose, and the men spend most of their time betting on how many turns of the valve will completely shut off the main pipe from a giant vat of Valvoline. Next slide. Just go through. Here's the Slouch Kavitsky. So not only did I kind of imitate his name, but he's literally Charles Bukowski with a tapered head. I was wondering, his wife is very litigious, but she never bothered me about this. The last panel is, you haven't lived if you haven't been to a Burger King men's room, the air vent, the piped-in music, the ketchup on the floor. Ask me, I know. You can go to the next one. See what else. My love for Ernie Bushmiller is unabated. I maintain it's the best comic strip ever. Look at these. I mean, these are just unbelievable. It doesn't get much better. To me, it's like defining comics. It's the dictionary definition of what a comic strip is.
You know what dawned on me the other day? Would you technically call Bushmiller part of the Clear Line, Tintin school in a way?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he really.
Although I would put it more in the how to cartoon mail order school. You too can draw.
Yeah.
So go to the next one. Of course, I've done my own. Luckily, they don't bother me. United Features owns Nancy. They bothered me when I started doing it a little bit.
Yeah.
But they've stopped, so I'm happy about that. In the last panel, Zippy has taken a little Lulu and Nancy and brought her home to his house, and she says to him in the last panel, "What would you do if I didn't exist, little Zippy?" And he says, "I'd have to invent you," which, of course, a switch on the what would we do if God didn't exist? We'd have to invent him. So.
And the famous 3 rocks.
The 3 rocks, the mysterious 3 rocks. Yes. Next. And I've done lots of strips about comics. Sometimes I make Zippy transform into these, adventure style or romance comic-looking characters and play with that whole idea. You can go to the next one. I love old comics, so this is the inside cover of one of my books from a few years back, all invented titles, all based on 1930s and 40s comic book covers. There's my little Lulu parody down there. Okay, next. And I can't resist. Zippy's superpowers blow away the superpowers of every other superhero who ever roamed the galaxy. He says, I have the incredible super ability to juxtapose seemingly unrelated concepts and phenomena to forge entirely new paradigms. Go on, ask me about bowling and laundry. And to protect the equilibrium of the billions who will never understand my mission, I pledge to appear comprehensible to only a select group of sophisticated, enlightened individuals. Namely you people right here. Okay. And this is I did a whole 48-day rant against superheroes in which Griffey enters a comic book store and gets sucked into a superhero vortex, and he and Zippy become these, what is it? Who am I parodying here?
Well, Griffey looks kind of like the Joker, and
Yeah,
a little
but
bit.
I can't remember the guy's name.
Rob Liefeld.
No, it's real dark stuff that lots of, alleyways and garbage strewn. No. Hmm? No. Anyway, well, maybe it says mutant. I made up these things, mutant enemies. Well, they basically become mutants, and they terrorize fanboys. And even though they are, in effect, a kind of superhero, they go on a superhero rant against superheroes. And anyway, going to the next one. And I love my background. My background is in painting and art. So I get in my favorite artists sometimes. This is a blatant ripoff of Edward Hopper paintings. And this is an example of me not trying to be funny, just trying to be a little poetic. There's something about this room, something about the light and the windows and the water tank and the coins. Coins, yes, and the coins. I especially like the coins. That's what those are, those structures that sometimes frame windows or columns, the blocks of granite separated by a little space. They're called coins. I love language, too. I love the word coin. I like to play with language. So get the next one. We can just go fast. Zippy expresses himself, his mystical side, primarily through bowling. He doesn't really like to bowl. He just likes to hold the ball. He doesn't like to release the ball. There are no bowling pins aside from those doing the tossing at the Dingberg Bowlodrome. Instead, kegglers heave their balls down the polished hardwood lanes and right into a very long black void at the end of each alley. Balls are non-retrievable and games are short, but discussions about a godless universe are lively. There's two pinheads talking. Life has no meaning. Let's play again. Okay, next. Just whip through the end. Laundry. Zippy finds deep meaning in the swirling clothing inside the porthole of a front loader.
Do you think the Dalai Lama is a fan of Zippy? He's secretly reading it.
He might be. I know. Who's the director of Rain Man?
I forget who directed that.
He was a big fan of Zippy. And
Yeah.
There's a short sequence in Rain Man where Dustin Hoffman is in a laundromat and staring at the twirling, and he's actually saying the pink sock, which is right out of a Zippy strip. So, look at the pink sock. You can go next. And God. I love playing with God. People always want to know, is God the character from Bob Dobbs from Subgenius? No. He's Bob. My God came from a 1946 aspirin ad in Life magazine. A brand of aspirin called Stand Back aspirin, apparently still made, only sold in the South. So I just use this, kind of clip art face, and then I turn him into various genders. The bottom it says, like the rest of us, God has both an ego and an id. So I use, to me, that's the authoritarian father figure God, and this is the impish God. So the father figure is saying, how about that universe, huh? And all of those 12 dimensions. And the imp says, antimatter, now that's creating. And then God becomes a woman all of a sudden. Personally, I like to take credit more for Bach or Andy Warhol, or for that old atheist Freud. And the imp God says, jolt cola, now that's begetting. And then God becomes a military guy. What do you think? I'm going over my plans for the apocalypse, the end times. And the imp God says, blow them up good, blow them up real good. And then God becomes a female again, holding a Tubby drawing. I decided to save one thing from the big meltdown. Here, it's a picture of Tubby, from Little Lulu comics. And the imp God says, no way, let that fat boy burn. I'd save Glenn Beck. I think cartoonists have a kind of godlike power, at least when we're drawing. And I like to go all the way and have actually God. I've gotten a few people written saying I'm a blasphemer, and I'm very disappointed that it's only a few. I guess it's either the people who think that are not reading me, or they like it. I actually have gotten a few people, religious people, saying that they do like it. And they think it's an interesting take on the deity. But I assume they must be Unitarians. The Baptists aren't too happy. Okay, next. And donuts, of course. Before The Simpsons, Zippy liked donuts. So there I am reading The Nation. What's it doing? Zippy says, it's raining glazed donuts, and you see them. And I say, is it the end of the world? And Zippy says, no, it's the end of the glazed donut drought. Just, how many more are there? Can we whip through them, or can we really? Yeah, just go to the movie. Go to 39, if you can.
While these are coming up, Bill, let's talk about how you stay au courant with lots of current culture that can become the target of your satire.
I monitor the culture on a regular basis. My reading matter consists literally of only the New York Times and the New Yorker. I read them both daily and weekly. But I do channel surfing and web surfing all the time. And I look at things that repulse me as a kind of duty. I remember when MTV started, I watched it because I said I've got to know about this. I have that attitude towards all sorts of cultural effusions. You know, I mean, I suffer through Justin Bieber videos on YouTube because I want to know who he is and what he's about. And I generally dip into all that stuff.
It's dirty work, but someone has to do it.
It's my job. Now this was a $25,000 ad taken out in Variety in the late mid-90s. We were then connected to the guy who made the Pee Wee Herman movies, Bill McEwen. He was the producer, Pee Wee Herman. And he was convinced this was going to be the next Pee Wee Herman. That actually doesn't say things will never look the same again in Japanese. It says, are we having financing yet? And I didn't do this. This is a hired gun. I art directed it, but I didn't. This is an airbrush, huge thing I have in my studio. And, meeting after meeting happened, and lots of money was poured into it. I have 9 drafts of a screenplay, and nothing developed. But I think I'm better off. I really do. Next. You can keep going. This is a great moment in my movie career. The folks at Disney Studios want to know, can Zippy greet visitors at Disneyland? Let's listen in. Now, this is based on a real meeting with Disney. And they requested the meeting. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Zippy, an unsettling dream image. Yow. And this is like the all-American nuclear family. Don't touch him, Jennifer. Jason, step back. The big head Zippy says, let's speak in tongues and then send out for pizza. Come on in. We'll confront our subconscious yearnings while satirizing current pop trends. My polka dots contain hidden messages. Are we having fun yet? Run, kids. Run for your life. Maybe we should have tried Warner Brothers, which we then did. And that ended in the producer, Bill McEwen, perceiving an insult because we were meeting with a lesser figure than he hoped for, at which point he screamed, do you know who I am? And he leapt across the desk and tried to choke the guy. Usually the meetings ended in a subtler kind of bad ending. I would get the message that the meeting was over. It didn't quite go the way this was a dramatic moment. I had no doubt we had to go to the elevator right away after that. So. Next. People ask me, how do you break into daily syndication? Actually, 2 years ago, I was at the Boston National Cartoonist Society meeting, and there were hundreds of people who wanted to be daily cartoonists. I couldn't believe it. I thought, this is a dying medium. The newspapers are shriveling. But
do you think it's the generation that was raised on Calvin and Hobbes and kind of
they were mostly male, and they were mostly in their early 30s. All during the history of comics in America, the holy grail has always been a daily strip, because if you do well, you can make a lot of money and you have security. And apparently this dream lives, oddly enough. And I'm happy. I'm glad that the medium is not going to go with my generation. This is just me saying, the way to be have a syndicated strip is basically to suffer through 15 years of underground obscurity and then turn down movie deal after movie deal and just stay by the phone. Anyway, go ahead next. A wonderful moment in my comics history. A few months before this strip, this is from 1995, I thought it would be funny if Zippy would enter the Family Circus world. And, with the dotted line going around, and Billy and Jeffy and the little suburban world they were in. I thought it would be interesting.
Which is kind of Levittown.
Kind of Levittown, right. Yeah. So before I started, I thought I would. Bill Keane, the cartoonist of the Family Circus, is also with my syndicate, King Features. I called King Features, got his phone number. He lives in Phoenix. I called him. I wanted to get permission, and I also wanted him to write the dialogue for the characters when Zippy encountered them. The first surprise was he loved Zippy, read it every day in the Phoenix paper. Wow, it's a guy in his 80s. Then he said it was a great idea, but he said, I'm no writer. You write the dialogue, and I'll letter it. I'll hand letter it. So we did this jam. It went on for like 7 or 8 days, where Zippy entered Family Circus world. And a few months later, I got a phone call from Bill Keane, and he says, turnabout is fair play. How about if you can put Zippy into one of my strips? So there it is. The two most surreal comics on the newspaper page meeting together at last. Okay, next. I think we're getting towards the end.
Yeah.
There's my Are We Having Fun Yet? In Bartlett's familiar quotations. My mother was very proud at this moment. Next.
No small accomplishment.
No. And there's Are We Having Fun Yet? Is my catchphrase, right? Like, it'll be on my tombstone. Am I dead yet, or whatever? Yeah. But I tried these. They never quite got on. Laundry is the fifth dimension, and then the next one.
Thumbs down.
Except provolone into your life. And then the next one. If you can't say something nice, say something surrealistic. Zombies rule Belgium. Just didn't quite catch on. And then here's my new book, the last, coming down to the end. So if you want to go upstairs, it's at the Fantagraphics table. And then next, I will not reveal any details, but this is
very tantalizing, Bill.
Yeah,
very tantalizing.
This is going to be like a 200-page book that I'm in about 50 pages into. And I will not say who the famous cartoonist is yet, but it's all true.
Do you feel, is this the final cover, or is it just a rough? Or
no, this is not the final cover. It's the cover.
Right. But this is the image that you've settled on for the cover.
Right. And that's my mother.
It's amazing.
Who I mentioned before was an occasional published writer, and she published science fiction in the late 50s.
This is the most Crumb-like I've ever seen your art. Do you get a vibe off? I mean, she looks. It looks like Griffith does Crumb in a way.
I don't see that.
No?
That's fine with me.
Yeah.
Maybe it's all the cross-hatching. My mother was very beautiful and a major influence in my life. And 15 minutes after my father died, she confessed this to me. Yes. And, wait 2 years and buy the book. What can I say? The next slide, just a little punchline moment. I always think, there I am with my wife in a trailer camp in Florida, still asking the unanswerable question, are we having fun yet? So that's it. That's it. Thank you. Thank you. This is a Zippy theme song. You can hear this on the Zippy website if you want to. The Manhattan Transfer, the group They just sent this to me one day. I didn't ask them to do it. They just sent it to me.
Others say he was sold for $500 to a traveling carnival sideshow. But all I know is Zippy, he's the cool and cool whip. Zippy, he's the blasting bean dip. Watch out, yow, 'cause here he comes. A totally